Hi everyone. This is the intro video for Philosophy 375 at the University of British Columbia, also known as Philosophy and Literature. Carrie Jenkins makes these videos. As you can probably see, I'm not Carrie Jenkins, but I am in fact one of your teaching assistants. My name is Kristen, and I have had the pleasure of interacting with you all on the message boards so far. And I am making the intro video this week, and I'll be doing the wrap up too, so it's really nice to meet you. I am not Carrie, but Carrie herself will be making a video about papers because those are coming up soon, so you can look for that. There's also a few links on the homepage that are relevant this week. So a couple of them are a bit farther down because they've been up for a while. So there is a link to an audio version of the text. It is made by an artificial voice, but it's not that bad. I listened to a bunch of it. Anyone with accessibility issues or requirements, you should know that there is an audio, a copy at the Crane Library that is a copy of the text on a 6 compact disc set read by an actual human voice, if you'd like to make use of that. There's also a link to a great lecture by Gregory Sadler on this text we're talking about this week, Nausea, and a link to another Sartre text that I'm going to be talking about in the second part of this video called Existentialism is a Humanism. It's not very long, so I put up a link to that on the homepage. So something we've been talking a lot about this semester is what is philosophy. So I thought I would do a little introduction telling you about how I found philosophy and what I think philosophy is, or one of the things I think philosophy could be. So my background is actually in creative writing and English literature, and I came to UBC to study creative writing. That's what I wanted to go to university for. And then I took a random intro to value theory course one summer, and I don't really think it's an exaggeration to say that it did change my life. I mean, now here I am in graduate school for philosophy, and I also have a personal connection to the text here that I wanted to talk about. So I was very Christian when I was young, and being gay was just kind of never talked about. So like in my community, I read the Bible a lot, I went to youth group a lot, I went to church all the time, and then every summer I worked and went when I was young at a Christian summer camp in Northern Ontario. I'm from Southern Ontario. I'm from the traditional territories of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, so kind of right in between Hamilton and St. Catharines. But at this camp that I worked at in Northern Ontario, there was so being gay was just kind of never talked about, but I knew it was in the Bible, and I had gotten questions from different people, and about what was going on here. And then one day I asked the director of the camp, like, okay, so like what's the deal with being gay? And I was in a leadership position at that time, so I was now responsible for teaching others about our beliefs, or my beliefs at the time. And the director of the camp told me that it was okay to have, I'm just going to use the words that were common in that community at the time. So the director of the camp told me that it was okay to have homosexual impulses, but if you acted upon them, then it was a sin. And anyone who's openly gay or lesbian or bisexual was not invited to work at the camp and be a part of this organization. And that didn't work for me, so I packed up and I left a few days later. And I think it's important to note that this organization still, to this day, is around. They are a Canada-wide organization, and they still to this day, this isn't just something that like one person told me, they still to this day hold this mandate that anyone who is a member of the LGBTQIA2 plus community is not welcome to be a part of their organization. So the way that this connects to the text that we're reading this week is because then when I discovered existentialism, it was a radically different framework from the one that I had been operating within, which was within this Christian framework that, as one of its underlying premises, said that we were all created in the essence of God. And some of that rhetoric is about how God determines our actions. There's a lot in the Bible about how God knows us intimately and how God shapes us before we're born. But existentialism takes a totally different starting point, and that results in a pretty different view of what free will means. So I'm going to talk about free will, and I'm going to talk about the background of existentialism in a bit, but I did want to talk about my personal connection here because it really did provide me with a way of thinking that was not framed by God. For the first time, it wasn't, oh, Kristen was, made by someone else, or someone else had imbued me with my characteristics. Existentialism has this idea that we are thrown into the world and then we create ourselves. And it's not the case that there is some creator or some being who forms something like a soul that has an intention. So existentialism lets us have a little bit more control. And I think this has influenced what my conception of philosophy is. So I see philosophy as it does many things, but one of the things philosophy does is it examines the edges of concepts, and philosophy can allow us to see different sides of things. Sometimes it's easy to tell what's black and white, but sometimes concepts overlap with each other and there are these gray areas near the edges. But I think philosophy can help us investigate different facets of a concept from different viewpoints and help us get a clearer view of what's going on. So I would also like to invite anyone who's interested to come and talk to me. I'm definitely having office hours this semester, and I'd love to talk about philosophy, about the UBC philosophy program, about graduate school and philosophy, anything like that. And my personal interests are in feminist philosophy and epistemology. So right now I'm working on a project I'm really excited about called The Philosophy Exception, that is about diversity in philosophy, or what we're arguing is a lack of diversity in philosophy. So we're hopefully going to launch a website for that soon, and I'll share it all when it's ready. So, philosophy and literature. I actually want to rewind and go back to the first week of our class here. So please, I'd like you to take this opportunity maybe to pause this lecture, go and find that link from the interview we watched with Iris Murdoch and Brian McGee from the first week. You don't have to watch the whole thing again. So if you just go up to moment 29 and watch about 4 minutes, that's when they're discussing Sartre and la nausea, or nausea in specifically. That was a little bit of a funny slip because I said disgusting while I was talking about nausea, which I guess makes sense. And when we're talking about this book. Anyways, so this comes right after they are talking about Tolstoy. This is Brian McGee and Iris Murdoch. So we had a previous discussion about one of these quotes from their conversation. So just as a refresher, Iris Murdoch says that with regards to the fact that, so Tolstoy says in the epilogue of War and Peace that he was trying to express a certain philosophy of literature in this novel. He expressly says that. And then when McGee asks Iris Murdoch what she thinks about this with regards to doing philosophy and literature, she says that she doesn't think the writer necessarily knows. Tolstoy says this, but why should we attend to him? Don't trust the writer, trust the tale you know. One has to see what he's actually achieved. So when we discussed this on the forums, a lot of people agreed, saying things like, a text can be interpreted in any number of ways, regardless of what the author desires, and that the intention of a text is how the reader interprets it. This sort of death of the author kind of idea from Roland Barthes. Questions like, does the author really have control over their work after it's published? But some folks also thought that there is this unique position that literature can take with regards to philosophy, and our task this week is to examine one of these examples. So, even though Iris Murdoch says that philosophers should keep out of novels, on the whole, she says that she herself feels a horror putting theories as such into a book. But Murdoch does say that this novel, Nausea, is the one good philosophical novel she can think of. But she does go on to say that she thinks this is just a lucky chance that Sartre pulled it off this time. So she still thinks that generally she doesn't like philosophy and literature mixing, but that there is something to do with the dramatic form of the thought in the philosophy of existentialism itself. So Murdoch seems to suggest here that Sartre is using a kind of phenomenological approach when he's writing this novel, an approach that evokes feelings, or an approach that examines our position in the world and what we perceive, the phenomenons that we're perceiving and experiencing. She seems to imply that this is what Sartre is doing when she says, this is another quote, "One can see that there is some sort of drama that can be exhibited. There's some kind of feeling about the world that belongs both to the philosophy and to the novel." So keep on the lookout for this feeling while you're reading the novel this week. Murdoch is trying to write totally separate novels. She's saying that when she's writing novels, she's not doing philosophy at all. And if she knew about something else instead of philosophy, if she knew about sailboats, then that would end up in her novels. But this is very different from Sartre, right? Who's saying extremely clearly that he's setting out to do philosophy through this novel. And so the idea here, what our task is for this week, is we are going to take Murdoch at her word. So we're going to take Nausea as the clearest case of a philosophical novel that we might have. So this is something that is squarely in the intersection of philosophy and literature. And we can still disagree about this, of course, that's still up for grabs, but let's take Murdoch at her word on this one and examine this as a potential instance of philosophy and literature and see how well it holds up. So I'm going to give a little background on Sartre and the history of existentialism, like the major concepts of existentialism rather. Existentialism has a long and rich history that won't fit in this video. But something I'm not going to do too much is get into a literary analysis, because I'd like to direct you to that Gregory Sadler video. And when I was talking to Carrie about preparing for this week, we both thought it was so ironic that Sadler says he's not doing literature in this video, but he definitely is. And he, very beautifully picks up some of the major themes and literary techniques that are being used and discusses them in a beautiful way. So I'm gonna let Sadler do that, and I'm going to give a little bit of background of existentialism before we get into talking about the text on the discussion boards this week.